On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're talking about the Lightning's win on the road in Chicago, 4-1 win, their fourth straight win. We also talk about, is Alex Killorn making himself a case to stay in Tampa Bay? We talk about that, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I want to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're talking about Alex Killorn's recent play in his last 5 games, 4 goals. Another goal last night against the Chicago Blackhawks in the 4-1 win to give the Lightning their 4th straight win. And there was a lot of talk coming into this season about Alex Killorn. His contract's up next year. Do the Lightning trade him now? You know, is the last couple of years, Killorn has kind of taken a dip. Not so much in his numbers, but if you look at his play, the way he's been playing on the ice, last year was a good performance. 25 goals out of him. The year prior, only 15. That was a COVID shortened season, but the way he plays, a lot of guys tend to break down early on. That presence in front of the net. He's dealt with injuries here and there, but he's really had a resurgence this year. 30 through 36 games played, 12 goals, 26 points, and it looks like he's really had a rejuvenation this year, and he's really come up big for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season, especially, like I said, in his last 4 games, he has 4 goals. His last 5 games, he's had 4 goals, playing really aggressive out there. In that game against Chicago, he has 5 shots, which I have stressed a ton on this podcast, how important it is not only for the Lightning as a team, but for certain players to really be able to go out there and play aggressive. And what really stuck out to me about Killorn, not only in this game, but also in previous games, was the fact that he's skating with so much confidence. And I've spoken about it on this show numerous times about, and this really pertains to any player on the Lightning, I think, and really any player in the NHL. As long as the puck is bouncing your way and you're playing with a ton of confidence and you're playing aggressive and you're playing discipline, you have really a good chance of going out there on a nightly basis and being able to play and well, not only play well, but really make a huge impact on your team's games. And really last night and really just lately over their last 5 games, Alex Killorn has been doing just that. So especially in this time with the Lightning, where and I've been seeing some comments on some of the videos that some of the listeners on this show, we've been talking about, or have been talking about, with the way Ross Colton has been playing this year, Alex Killorn wasn't really, he got off to a little bit of a slow start. And like I said, has picked it up over the last couple of games. But a lot of people are talking about, and what I've seen online, should the Lightning make a trade? Should they, and even Killorn, contracts up to after this year, do the Lightning deal him at the deadline, regardless of how he's playing? Do they keep him if he's playing well? And I think that really is what we're going to start to see the conversation unfolding as the season progresses, as we get closer to trade deadline. Alex Killorn, does he deserve at this point in time to stay in Tampa Bay? And GM Julian Brees-Boss is going to have to make a very tough decision, because if Alex Killorn is playing well, if he continues to stretch now, I don't really expect him to continue having a four goal in 5 game pace as we have seen. But if we're putting on our general manager hat right now, does Alex Killorn has he done enough at this point in the season to merit himself a permanent place here on this team for the rest of the season? And in my opinion, I don't think it really has that much to do. That answer really doesn't have so much to do with what Killorn is doing. Now, obviously, if he continues this pace, if he's averaging 4 goals for every 5 games, I mean, he has to stay here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You roll the dice with him, and then the Lightning, what they have shown, especially this season, with Nick Pervix and in years past with forwards as well, is that they do have the depth in the minors and players that are in college. So I'm not too worried about if the Lightning do eventually need to replace Killorn next year. I'm more concerned about if Killorn can continue his pace and if the guys around him can continue to play well. Because if we start to see Ross Colton play better, if we start to see Brandon Hagel uh, get an uptick in his performance, then maybe the conversation can be made. That also all depends on what kind of deal is out there for the Lightning at that point in time as the trade deadline nears. But right now, in my opinion, I think that if you had to make the decision right now in this moment, I would say you keep Killorn for the rest of the year. Killorn has done enough to really help this team. When he plays well, the Lightning play well, and the players around him play more loose. They play more confidently, and clearly it's resulting in wins. So there's really not much more you could say about that. And Killorn's play, it has really catapulted this team over the last month to a whole nother level. 10-3 in December. The Lightning have been playing fantastic, and really, I said from the beginning of the year that really, when it comes down to this team's long-term success, it's not going to come from the first line. It's not going to come from the stars on this team. It's going to come from the guys like Ross Colton. It's going to come from the guys like Brandon Hagel, like Alex Killorn. I was very critical of Killorn last year during the playoffs, obviously, because he was pretty much non-existent, but it seems as though he's turned it around tremendously over the last month, and is really starting to get hot. So if the Lightning could just not lean too much on Alex Killorn, I think that we won't see, like I said, we won't see 4 goals in 5 games pace. We won't see that. But what we can see is, as long as he stays healthy, as long as he gets the amount of ice time that he's been getting, and he's playing and skating the way he's been skating, I think we could see the ceiling could be for him about 3 goals in 5. I think that's a good number to strive to at for Alex Killorn. I think that's a good expectation. I also would be fine with him having multi-point games here and there, not necessarily scoring goals, because as we all know, when he's dishing the puck, if he's getting points, that most likely means someone else is scoring goals. Someone like Braden Point or maybe Nikita Kucherov, or the names can be interchangeable. So he's playing that well right now, and he does have that skill set when he is healthy and he's rolling to make the players around him better. So I have to say, yeah, right at this point in time, Alex Killorn has definitely made the case towards John Cooper and Julian Bruce Boss that he is here for the rest of the season, and should be a Lightning until at least the end of the playoffs. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see how Killorn plays over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully he continues his upward trend, or the pace that he is at right now. I would love to, because I would love to see him continue to play that way, because really, like I said, when you got the production from the lower lines, everybody on this team is able to go out there and play very well. So, and the Lightning will definitely need that production going into the month of January with the schedule they have with this West Coast trip. So we'll keep an eye on that. In the second segment, we'll be talking about the win over Chicago. The Lightning keep things rolling, their 4th straight win. Can we see them start to get on a crazy win streak here over the next couple of weeks? I've spoken on previous episodes that the schedule is tough, but the Lightning are playing very well. They've been doing a lot of things well. They're playing disciplined hockey, and I think that we have the potential of them getting to about 8, maybe 7, around that mark in win streak. So we'll talk about that as well, everything from this game in just a bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and that is BetOnline. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. Well, World Cup's over, so I guess hockey. Yes, hockey. World Juniors is going on right now. I guess that's the World Cup of hockey. So definitely bet on that. Team USA is playing Canada right now, so definitely bet money on that. They've got it all at betonline.net. They're always the fastest and easiest way to bet on your sports betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. So once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. Give us a follow on our social media pages at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You could give me a follow on Twitter at DenkyDank, DenkyDank. Love hearing from all of you on this segment. We're talking about last night's win against the Chicago Blackhawks. Lightning pick up their 4th straight win. The first of this 3-game road trip. Last night they were in Chicago. Now tonight they're in Minnesota. And then on Friday they're playing Winnipeg. And the other thing I also want to talk about with this, not only with this win, is that, I've always spoken about on past episodes, and I really always talk about it, is that really, if the Lightning could win games, winning a game is one thing. If you're dropping 7 goals, or if you're playing crazy well. The thing I look for when Tampa wins the game or they play well is that, I always ask myself, and I always ask you guys, the listeners, and let me know as well, alongside, with our conversation in the previous episode, what do you think about Killorn? Has he earned a spot here in Tampa for the playoffs? I always look for if the style of play or the level of play has been consistent enough to where it could be continuously replicated throughout the stretch of some games. And we looked at this last night's game, and it kind of somewhat, and I spoke about it, I pretty much nailed it on the head. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but kind of nailed it on the head about how this game was going to go early on. The Lightning were pretty much playing on their heels early on in the game. I just figured from the way that this roster is constructed in Chicago that, yeah, they're not good. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Also, I don't think anybody would have predicted that Stalock would have played as well as he did in net for the Blackhawks. But the Lightning definitely were on their back heels in the first period, outshot 12-6, pulled it together in the second. Still at the end there, the Blackhawks were surging, and the Brian Engblom and Dave Randorf said it perfectly at the end of the second period that they couldn't not wait for that period to be over. But the Lightning turned it on as always in the third period. Once again, consistently getting better throughout the course of a game, which and really, for the most part, playing well, playing disciplined. Ian Cole had 3 penalties last night, which, you know what? I'm not going to kill Ian Cole for taking 3 penalties. I was frustrated because, I always say, don't give, regardless if a team is good or bad, you'd never want to give up odd man opportunities to an opposing team. But listen, everyone's going to have their bad nights. Ian Cole had his. He's normally very solid, and he's been playing well this year. So I can't really knock him for having an off night like that. It wasn't something that really eventually contributed to anything. The Lightning won this game 4-1, if you want to count the empty netter. Really, in retrospect, 3-1. But Lightning played well. They waited for their chances, because what Chicago did was they were doing a very good job of disrupting the Lightning's zone entry. They're disrupting the Lightning's neutral zone play, and the Lightning in return were also doing the same thing. But alongside with that, which I really think was the difference maker in the end for this team, was the Lightning were very active in the passing lanes on defense. What they really did, and you saw it here and there, which really gave the Lightning, even though there was times on the rushes where I really thought, especially on the opposite ends of passes, the Lightning had their chances. They weren't hitting the net, but what they were doing, like I said, they were giving themselves the opportunities by disrupting the passing lanes, getting their sticks on the passes, and allowing themselves to have those opportunities down the other end. But at the same time, you have Stalock and Net, who uh, we spoke about the other day about how this Blackhawks goaltending situation is not good, and that's really the main reason why they are where they are. Um, and obviously we didn't see Pete Mrazek, but we saw Stalock in that. And the thing that was frustrating, and I always say this about the lesser teams that the Lightning run into, is that the Lightning always bring out the best in other teams, and that I feel like is a good thing for them, because then it almost gives them that mentality that you can never take really a night off. And we saw it in this game. The Lightning played well. They were persistent throughout the game to not do anything too crazy that could have eventually put the Blackhawks in the driver's seat to take this game away from them. But like I said, these are the kind of and I've said this before, these are the kind of games that the Lightning should, and most of the time do win, because their experience, their leadership, when you have guys like Alex Killorn playing the way they have, like we spoke about in the previous segment, uh, especially guys like Nikita Kucherov, who played very well in this game. He was doing a lot of things in terms of setting up teammates, which you always kind of rely on Kucherov to get things started. Which is, if you look at his stat sheet, you would have thought that he had somewhat of a quiet night. He had one shot on net, no points, but at the same time, it wasn't necessarily. You don't necessarily always have to look at Kucherov stat sheet to really determine whether or not he had a good night. He was doing a very good job of drawing in the defense, allowing other players to get opportunities, which unfortunately on a couple of those passes that Kucherov made, they just weren't able to bury it home. But listen, that's why you got guys like Brandon Hagel who scored a goal in this one, guys like Brian Elliott, who played very well in net last night, saved 25 of 26 shots. Like I said, when you have a couple of guys like Braden Point, like Alex Killorn last night, like Cooch, that allows guys like Hagel, Maroon, Elliott to flourish in these kind of wins. And really down the line, if you look at the rest of the month of January, or we're still obviously in 4 days into the new year, and into the schedule that is January. We look at the schedule, and I've spoken about it, that it's going to be very tough for the Lightning. I think this is one of the tougher months uh, that the Lightning are going to have in terms of their schedule. But at the same time, obviously, I'm not worried, because this team, the way they've been playing recently, everybody is starting to really come together and play as a team on every single night. And you have to look at the schedule now. You think about, they're playing Minnesota tonight. They're playing Winnipeg on Friday, both of which I think are very winnable games that the Lightning definitely could win tonight. Friday, depending on what we see from Vasilevsky and Hellebuck, I mean, that could be a game. Oftentimes, when you see two top goaltenders, obviously we all want to see a low scoring, very good defensive minded goaltending game. Sometimes you get that. Sometimes you get high scoring games where it's just absolutely out of control. Um, I think if the Lightning could win these two games, or at least, I know they could win tonight. I think you could steal one on Friday against Winnipeg. And then you look at the next week, you got Columbus, Vancouver, and St. Louis. Now we're talking about right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You win those next couple of games, you win those next five, excuse me, and you're on the verge of a 9-game winning streak. So, and the week after, up until Edmonton, we're talking about the Lightning possibly getting to the double digits in wins in terms of a win streak for the first time this year, something that they haven't done in a very long time. So, as difficult as this schedule is, the way the Lightning are playing, you know, they could potentially be considered, and I think they were in December by most people, one of the hottest teams in the NHL. And I think that not only if the Lightning could get themselves into the double digits in on this win streak, which is, like I just stated, very possible when you got Columbus, Vancouver, and St. Louis, and then Seattle, Vancouver again. The question mark right there after that is Edmonton on a second game of a back-to-back. We're talking about not only that, but at the same time, something I've brought up on past episodes, Tampa Bay possibly not only catching up to Toronto, but possibly knocking on the doorstep of Boston. Possibly. We got to see what Boston does. But Lightning could potentially solidify themselves, if they haven't already, in terms of their record to most of the NHL crowd, as being one of the top 5 teams in the league by mid-January, as while they continue this win streak going into the later half of January. So, wrapping things up on the show, like I said, looking at this schedule, I really think that it is very possible that the Lightning, as long as they continue to play the way that they have played over the last month, 10-3 on the month of December, played very well the other night against Chicago, and really expect them to win this game. I'd be very disappointed if they lose this one tonight, unless it's a game where we see them play well, or if they get kind of, I guess, screwed, if you want to say. I never want to say they want to get screwed on calls, because that's always, regardless, unless it's something that's in the last couple of seconds of a game, really I don't think there's any one call that could determine really the outcome of a game. But looking at this whole month, I mean, you really got to ask yourself, if the Lightning could get through this week without losing a game, which I think is very possible, and then you roll into the second week of January against Columbus, Vancouver, and St. Louis, all very much very winnable games, all 3 of those. And then you get Seattle, who the Lightning did a very good job against them. I felt like that was a rather pedestrian win for Tampa, even though Seattle has played very well this year. And then you got Vancouver again. You get up to that Edmonton game, which I still think the Lightning could win that game as long as they limit the special teams opportunities for Edmonton. I honestly don't see the Lightning losing a game until potentially the 26th, where they run into Boston at home. And by then, we could be having the discussion that Tampa is in second place, somewhat in arm's reach of Boston. Who knows what Boston will do from now until then. Like I said, I'm not so much worried in terms of the Lightning catching the Bruins right now. I'm more so concerned about the Lightning continuing to play well, which they have, and continuing to get within arm's reach of Toronto, which I firmly believe is still very much attainable. I think that as well as Toronto has played this season, I think Tampa is, and we look at the standings right now. I mean, we can't look at this, this schedule and what I just spoke about, some of the points that I've made, and not almost fantasize about the day in which could come any day now, in which Tampa Bay could overtake Toronto in the Atlantic Division. Right now, as it sits, Tampa Bay is only 4 points behind. So you're talking about 2 Toronto losses and 2 Tampa wins, and boom, you're tied. You're right in the driver's seat right there. So. And also on the other side of that coin is that you definitely want Tampa Bay to start to pad their margin of points in front of Toronto as soon as possible once they overtake them, which I think that I would almost be surprised if we're sitting here at the end of January and discussing Tampa being maybe 1 or 2 points in front of Toronto instead of maybe 4 or 5 points. I think that really should be the goal. Continue to play well, continue to play discipline, and really at least get ahead of a handful of points in front of Toronto at the end of January as you head into February. So Tampa Bay will be in Minnesota tonight, 9:30 game start. Fully expect this one to be won. I would fully expect that Vasilevsky's back in net tonight after Elliott had to start, of course, last night. We'll probably see Vasilevsky on Friday as well against the Winnipeg Jets, so keep an eye out for that. I think that this tonight, if I'm going to predict an outcome, I would say Lightning win 4-2. Goals from Point. Stamkos, I would like to see him start to get back on the board there. Goal from Kucherov, please. And then probably from Sergachev. I think we need to. I want to start to see more production from this defensive line. It's been quite a little bit since we've seen Sergachev score a goal. So I would like to see him start to get back into the swing of things offensively. And we'll be back tomorrow. So we'll be back tomorrow to recap this game and talk about all the storylines from that. So please, once again, like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. Subscribe to our YouTube page. And don't forget to comment below. What do you think about Tampa's recent style of play? Can we expect them to be 5 points ahead? I think that's the goal for everybody here. 5 points ahead of Toronto at the end of January, knocking on the doorstep for Boston. So we'll be back tomorrow to recap tonight's game against the Minnesota Wild. But in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.